Hello, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my first quarter of the year wrap up. So I was planning on doing, a January wrap up, but then I didn't have time. So then I was planning on doing a January and February wrap up, but I also didn't have time for that one. So here we are, wrapping up the first 3 months of the year, or like the first quarter of the year. And I have 31 books to talk about because I read 9 in January, 10 in February, and 12 in March. This is gonna be a lot. I mean, I've watched wrap-ups of like just 1 month where people read 30 books, but that is definitely not my reality. And yeah, this is gonna be a lot of books to talk about, but some of them are like a part of a series or like a complete series. So, I will talk about a bunch of books all at once, so that is gonna be faster. But the first one I'm gonna be talking about is just a standalone book, and it is called Green Fuse Burning, and that was a horror book, or honestly maybe a horror novella. Like, I remember it was pretty short. I think I read it on either like January 1st or January 2nd, so it has been a second. But we were following Rita, who was a painter, and she was signed up by her girlfriend in a like contest, and she had to present 5 pieces or like 5 paintings. And so Rita goes to a cabin to, be by herself, have time and peace to create her paintings. And while she's there, she's like navigating grief because she had lost her father, and also the issues in her relationship because they were having issues. And at the same time, there are like some weird, creepy things happening surrounding the cabin. And like, it was pretty creepy, but I feel like it was more sad than scary. And I still really enjoyed it. I really liked the creepy scenes. And we also had like pictures in the book, which was really fun, and I really ended up enjoying it, and I gave that one 4 stars. And then we are moving on to a series, and it is a 5-book series, but I only have the first 3 physically because my friend gave them to me. And this is the Power of 5, or the Gatekeepers series. I've seen both names, but it is a kind of horror thriller fantasy-ish series, and like I said, it has 5 books. And the first is Raven's Gate, the second is Evil Star. They're in Portuguese, so I was like translating. And the third is Night Rise, which is not the translation of what is written here, but it's like the name of a corporation thing in the series. And so in the first book, we meet Matt, who was, I don't exactly remember, like 15, 14, I don't really remember, but he was a teenager, and he was living with his aunt because he had lost his parents when he was younger. And he, in the beginning of the first book, he got in trouble, and I mean, his aunt didn't really want to take care of him anyway. So when the judge offered the option of him going to like a foster home, Matt was like not against it because he also didn't like living, the books were falling, didn't like living with her aunt because she didn't treat him well. And so he goes to that foster family, and while he's there, very weird things, very creepy things start happening, and also everyone in that town is really, really creepy. And we learn that he is one of the 5 who are tasked with keeping some evil creatures from coming to our world, because they are like the gatekeepers, and so they have to make sure those creatures don't cross through the gate to our world. And in the past, there were 5 kids who, banished those creatures, and now there are 5 new teenagers who are the 5, and Matt is one of them. And this book, it definitely had like the creepier vibe out of all of the books, which I did really love, but I didn't really love the main character, and I wasn't like obsessed with it, but I was definitely interested enough, and I felt like it was, a good introduction to the series, and I gave this one 3.5 stars. And then in books 2, 3, and 4, we got to know the other 4 gatekeepers, and we got to obviously know more about the history of the gatekeepers and of those creatures that they had to protect the world from. And I enjoyed these three more than the first, but in some of them, like, the characters weren't my favorite, and in others the plot wasn't my favorite. So I enjoyed all of them, but I again wasn't obsessed, and I gave those three books 4 stars. Oh, and I forgot to say, the fourth book was called Necropolis. And then the fifth book, which was called Oblivion, in that one, like, we were set kind of in the future, and things were very different, and like, things were crazy. And in this one, I love the plot, I love the characters, I love the action, I also really like the ending, I love everything that was happening. With this one, I was definitely obsessed, and so I gave the final one 5 stars. Then I read Their Vicious Games, which was a thriller, and in that book we were following Adina, and she, in the beginning of the book, before like the beginning of the book, she gets in trouble because she is involved like in a fight, and she loses her chance of going to the college that she wanted to go, and that she was expecting to go, and that she was planning to go. And so she wants to regain her chance to go to her dream college. And there is like a competition that is called the Finish. And whoever wins that, they basically like become almost part of the family that is hosting that competition. And they are like a very rich, influential family. And so being part of that family means opening like all the doors that you want, and that would definitely grant Adina the chance of going to that college that she wants. And so she enters that competition, and we see all of the things that they have to do, and it is definitely very dangerous, deadly. And then they are told that there is another prize for the winner, but it's not like a prize that Adina wants. And yeah, it gets kind of crazy, it is intense, and it is definitely thrilling. And I also really like the main character, I really like the way that it ended, and I definitely had a lot of fun with it, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I read Mislaid in Parts Half Known, which is the 9th book in the Wayward Children series, which is a series of fantasy novellas. And in those books we follow different kids, or like teenagers, that they find doors that lead them to other worlds, and then they end up coming back, and some of them, like, they feel like they actually belonged in that other world, and others feel like they never belonged in those worlds and don't want to go back. And those kids that come back, a lot of them go to a school that is where our characters are, the ones that we're following in this series. And so in this book, we are following actually the same character from the previous book, who's Ansi, and she has like gotten to that school, and her classmates have realized that she has a power to find things, and some of them really want to find their doors again to go back to those worlds that they explored. And I have like mixed feelings about this series, because I really love the books where we get to meet a new character, get to meet a whole new world, like explore a whole new world with them. I really love those books, but I don't love the books where we're just following the characters like on a quest. And this one was actually a mix of both. And I was expecting to really love that we're following Ansi, because I absolutely love her in book 8. So that was almost like guaranteed for me to love. But we had the quest aspect of the book, because they were trying to find doors, trying to, find the places that those other kids came from. And yeah, we had that quest, but at the same time, we did see a lot of other worlds, which was fun, but we didn't really have enough time with, like, in any of those worlds. So yeah, I still really loved it. And honestly, I feel like if it wasn't Ansi that was the main character, maybe I wouldn't have enjoyed it as much as I did, but I absolutely love her. She is super adorable, and I still really love the book, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I read, we're moving on to February, or I think this was like actually my last January book, but it was for a video in February, my annual romance video. So yeah, I don't like romance, so let's start by saying that, but I read it once a year for like around Valentine's Day. And yeah, I read 4 books that were chosen by my friend because she almost exclusively reads romance. So I was like, just, tell me some romances to read. And some of them she chose like knowing that I wouldn't like, and others she chose hoping that I would like. And I started by the one I was least likely to enjoy. And I can tell you it was definitely the one I disliked the most. So that first one was When Beauty Tamed the Beast, which, like I said, obviously it was romance and it was also historical, which is why I was expecting to like it the least, because I don't like romance, but I also don't usually read like historical stuff because also not really my thing. But we were following Lynette, and everyone thought that she was pregnant because she was seen kissing a prince, I think. And then a like few days later or like weeks later, not exactly sure, she wore a dress that made her look pregnant, and so everyone thought that she was pregnant, including her father. And so he decided to marry her off to a guy that's like a rich guy that could not have kids of his own. And so Lynette is sent to that guy's house, and the guy is called Pierce, and he's a doctor, and we get to meet like some of his patients throughout the book, and he immediately realizes that Lynette is not pregnant, and they talk about it, and like neither of them wants to get married, so they decide to not get married, but obviously they fall in love because this is a romance book. And I really didn't like anything about their romance. Like, I didn't like the way they flirted. I really, really hated the sex scenes. They felt like so cringy to me, like they gave me the ick, and then after that, every time they interacted, I was just like, ew. So there is that. And also I was bored because there was like no other subplot happening other than the romance, and I usually don't care about the romance, but in this case, I really disliked it. So yeah, I was just mostly bored and kind of annoyed. And I didn't like hate it with a burning passion. Definitely didn't. Like, I have hated other romances in the past, or like specifically one. I didn't like hate it, but I also definitely didn't like it. And so I gave it 2 stars. Then I read Queen of Shadows, which is the 4th book in the Throne of Glass series, which is fantasy, and I can't really get into the plot because it's the 4th book in the series, but I feel like I'm one of the last people to read the series, so most people probably know what this is about. And basically, like, in the beginning of the series, we are following Selena, who is like, she was an assassin, and then at the beginning of the 1st book, she is actually in prison because she was betrayed. And in the 1st book, she competes to become the king's champion. But things are just like so vastly different now. I mean, we are still following Selena, but things are like very, very different, like in this book, from like what they were in the 1st book. Like I said, I can't really talk about the plot, but in terms of the characters, in this book, like, I loved every single female character, even Selena, and I didn't really love her in the beginning of the series, but like, since I read the prequel and then book 3 and now book 4, she has definitely grown on me. I really like her now, and yeah, I definitely really loved every female character, and I didn't care about any of the men, like any single one. Like, not even the guy I used to like before. Didn't care about a single one of them. And also, I couldn't care less about the romance that is like the main romance of the series. Couldn't care less. Like, I don't hate it, I just don't care at all about its existence. But in terms of the plot, I really liked it. I was invested in like all these subplots that were happening. I was having a great time, and I also really liked the pacing, and the action scenes were super fun. And especially in the last third, where all the main characters kind of came together, even the ones that were like from different places, different sides that had never met before. Like, they all came together for a bit, and that was super, super fun. And this is definitely my favorite in the series so far, and I gave it 4.5 stars. Then I read another of the romance books, which was Leo Loves Aries. And in that one, we were following Theo, and also kind of his twin sister Leonie. It was all from Theo's POV, but she was also present in most of the chapters. And their boyfriend, or like ex-boyfriend and girlfriend, broke up with them and they started dating each other and are now getting married. And they invited both Theo and Leonie for their wedding, and they want to find dates for said wedding. And they're also looking for a roommate to share their house with. And at the same time, Theo is trying to get the tutor that he had on a previous semester back. And so he talks to that tutor guy, who I think was called Jamie, something. And he is looking for a place. So they decide that he will be their new roommate. And their mom, she is really like into astrology. And she tells them that since both of them are Leos, they like need an Aries, or like two Arieses, one for each, obviously. And guess who is an Aries? Obviously Jamie. And also the fact that they're Leos, and he's called Theo and she's called Leonie. I never got over that. But anyway, Theo decides that he's going to try to set up Leonie and Jamie, but he's the one who ends up falling for Jamie. And it was very obvious from the beginning that Jamie was into him. And people in romance books are always blind, I guess, to other people's feelings. But this one was definitely more fun because the characters were more fun and their flirting was also more fun and never gave me the ick. So I was okay with them, interacting, existing. And like, it was okay, but I still didn't really care about the romance, And I was still bored because there was also no other plot happening other than the romance, so I just didn't really care that much. But I definitely enjoyed it more than the other, and it was just, I didn't like it, I didn't dislike it, it was just right there in the middle, so I give it 2.5 stars. Then I read Babylon's Ashes and Strange Dogs, which were books 6 and 6.5 in the Expanse series. And this is a sci-fi series, and it is set like in our solar system, but in the future. And there are a bunch of planets in the solar system that are inhabited by humans. And there are tensions between the people from different planets. And there is also a like biological threat, I guess, to the whole system, to the whole world. And also in book, like, I don't know, 4, around that, there were some doors that opened to explore other places, and there is a lot going on in this series, but I can't really be more specific than that. But I really, really love this series, and with this book specifically, I just had like one issue with it. And I mean, this is obviously a series, like books are continuations of each other, but the like main plot of each book is usually different. Like their missions are usually different because we are following a spaceship crew, and they usually have different missions in each book. And obviously they're all connected because it's a series, but they're different. And this one just felt like too much of a continuation of the previous one. It was like the same mission, like fighting the same people, doing kind of the same thing. So that was like the only issue that I had, because I felt like the plot wasn't really moving that much for a big chunk of the book. But other than that, like, I loved it, and I love these characters so much. I love their like found family, and I love the action scenes, and I love the world. I love everything about it. I just had like that issue with it, but it didn't bother me like as much. Like the fact that it was slow didn't bother me as much, because like I love these characters and I love being with them regardless of what they're doing. And so I still really love it, just not as much as the previous books, because I think like the previous 2 or 3 books I gave 5 stars to, so I didn't love it as much, but I still loved it, and I gave it 4 stars. And then Strange Dogs was the novella after it, and it was set like in another planet and also years in the future, and you were following a little girl who was like, she was exploring the planet because people hadn't been living on that planet for too long, so she was exploring, and she found some strange dogs, and she realized that the dogs, like, they could fix things. So she kept bringing them things to fix. And one of the things that she brings for the dogs to fix, like she definitely should not have brought them the thing, and everything goes definitely very wrong, and it got really weird, really creepy. Honestly, it felt kind of like a horror novella, and I absolutely loved it. It was so creepy, like unsettling, especially the ending, and like the actual ending I absolutely loved. So yeah, I loved every single second of reading that novella, and I gave it 5 stars. Then I read the 2 other romance books for that video, and so the third one for that video was Pestilence, which was the first book in the Four Horsemen, I think, series, which is like romance and fantasy. And basically in this series, the like Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse have come to Earth. But then they like went into hiding, and 5 years later, the first to reappear was Pestilence. And so he is, bringing the plague as he moves around the planet. And then we start following Sarah, who like stays behind on her village, like after everyone evacuates to run away from Pestilence. She stays behind to try to kill him, basically. And she tries to kill him, and shockingly, crazily, he can't die. Like, who knew a mystical figure wouldn't die, And like the shock like that she feels when he doesn't die, and especially the shock that she feels when she learns that other people have tried to kill him. Like, he is destroying the world. Does she think that she was the first person to try to kill the creature that is destroying the world? Like, who the fuck does she think she is? So that was a start. And then he basically kidnaps her to bring her along with him as he brings death and destruction to punish her, basically. And somehow they fall in love. And, in this one, there was definitely like another plot happening other than the romance, which I appreciated. But at the same time, I really did not like this romance at all. I just couldn't see what they saw in each other, why they fell in love, and not only like why she fell for him, but also why he fell for her. Like, none of it made sense. I couldn't see it. Nothing made sense for me as to how those two could have fallen in love. So there was that. Didn't like it at all. But there was that other, plot of death and sickness that was happening, and that was something that I appreciated was happening. And also Pestilence, like, he was really funny. He was really, really funny. So again, I didn't hate it, but definitely didn't like it either. And I also gave this one 2.5 stars. And then the last romance book I read was Wolfsong, which was also romance and fantasy. And in this one, we're following Ox, and we start when he is 12, and that was after his dad left him and his mom, and he started working at the place that his dad used to work at. And then we move forward a few years, and I think he was 16 when a family moved back to town. And that family, like, they had a secret because they were werewolves. And Ox gets like really close to the younger boy in that family who was called Joe. And then more years later, there is a killer that comes to town and basically destroys all of their lives. And we basically see how they, deal with that, how they try to rebuild their lives, how their relationships change. And I really, really, really loved Ox. He was like really precious, really adorable. And I liked like his found family. But in terms of the romance, I didn't care about it. I didn't dislike it, but I didn't care about it. But in this one, there was definitely like a whole other plot happening, like a big plot happening, which I enjoy. Like, I was worried, I was stressed, I was on the edge of my seat, I was suffering for Ox. I just loved Ox, honestly. That's the takeaway. I love Ox. And so I was feeling what he was feeling. And except like the romance part, I was not feeling that. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Like, I wish there wasn't as much focus on the romance, but also I guess that it was necessary for the story. So, there is that. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one. This was the only romance that I enjoyed, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I made a video where a random number generator chose my books, and I read 3 books for that. And the first one was A History of Wild Places, which is kind of mystery, kind of a thriller, kind of horror, kind of just general fiction. Not entirely sure what it was, but those were the vibes. And we were following Travis, and he has a gift for finding people. He can like touch an object and see glimpses of the person that he used to belong to and how they vanished. And so he's tasked with finding Maggie, who was an author and went missing. And so he is, following her steps, and he finds a place in the woods, like a community that is called pastoral. I still don't know how to say it. But it was supposed to be, just a myth, a legend, but it actually exists. And that is where Maggie went missing. And that is also where Travis goes missing. And then we fast forward some years. I don't know how many years, never knew. It was never really said. And I mean, maybe it was said at the end, but at this point it wasn't said. And we start following 3 characters that like live in Pastoral. And they were Theo, his wife Kala, and Kala's sister B. And we learned that no one can get in or out of Pastoral because they are afraid that they will bring in a disease that they call the rot. So they are just, kind of prisoners in there. And things are definitely weird and creepy in that community and feels very much like a cult, which I like reading cult stories. I find that they are definitely, very creepy, and I love creepy. So that was definitely the vibe. It was very unsettling, and things are not as they seem. And then they start realizing that maybe they are not as safe as they seem. And yeah, the atmosphere was super creepy, which I loved. And for like a big part of the book, we didn't really know like what was real and what wasn't. And I had like a theory that I thought was kind of crazy, but then actually was right, which didn't upset me because I liked that it was that. I thought it was really fun. But there were also other like reveals that I did not see coming and I did really enjoy. And yeah, I love it so much. It was definitely my kind of book, and I gave it 5 stars. And then for that video, I read another book that was the beginning of a series. And then I really liked it like so much that I just read the whole series in these months. And that was the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. So A Good Girl's Guide to Murder, Good Girl, Bad Blood, and As Good as Dead. I think those were the titles. And that is a YA mystery thriller series. And so in the first book, we start following Pip, and she is doing like a school project, like summer project, extra credit project. I'm not entirely sure what it was, but like it was in summer before school started again. And she was working on a mystery kind of, even though it had technically like legally been solved, she didn't believe that it was actually solved. And basically that was Andy's death because a girl from their town, she was presumed dead because her body had never been found, but she was presumed to have been killed, and presumed to have been killed by her boyfriend Sal, who then was assumed to have killed himself because his body was found and people assumed was a suicide. But Pip doesn't believe that Sal actually killed Andy, or even maybe himself. And so Pip teams up with Sal's brother Ravi, and they are investigating, and we see them investigating and interviewing people and going through their suspects. And like there were so many suspects. And it was really fun. I also really, really liked the characters. It was such a fun time, and I also really liked the reveal. And yeah, had a great time with that book, and I gave it 4 stars, and definitely wanted, obviously, to continue with the series. And so in the second one, Pip is, like, she's kind of famous now for solving that mystery, and she has a podcast, and a friend of hers, he asks her for help because his brother, like, has gone missing, and the police doesn't want to help because they say that, he's an adult, he's free to vanish, basically, if he wants. And so no one is helping him, and he asks Pip, and she reluctantly agrees because she doesn't really want to get involved in that, because working on the other mystery got her a lot of problems and she doesn't really want to get involved, but also she wants to help her friend. So she ends up getting involved and we once again see her investigating, which is again super fun. And I also really like the reveal in this one, and like the end of this book was absolutely insane and I love it, and I gave it 4.5 stars. And then for the last one, it's, well, in this one Pip was definitely struggling because she was very like traumatized by what happened at the end of the second book, the thing that I said was insane. And so yeah, she was struggling, and at the same time she also had a stalker, and no one from like authorities, no one really wanted to help her, so she was working on all that. And in this one, like, I kind of had an issue with the reveal because we got a reveal like halfway through the book, and I thought it was so obvious. And the thing, I think like what annoyed me was the fact that it was so obvious from like the information that we got, and for the characters, like it wasn't. And that was really like, come on, you were so smart, and it was so obvious. You know, that kind of bothered me. Didn't love that. But then the second half definitely like took a turn that I was not expecting, and it was, not sure I want to use the word fun because the character was definitely not having fun, but it was insane. It was crazy. It was action packed. It was like I was on the edge of my seat. And yeah, I still really, really enjoyed it, and I gave this one 4 stars. Then the last book for that video was Wonders, which is kind of general fiction, kind of dystopian. And in this one, we start with a girl who suddenly just starts like walking. She just starts walking. No one knows where she's going. She is like not responsive. She doesn't interact. She doesn't stop. She is just walking. And then more people join her, and people start calling them the sleepwalkers. And yeah, they all like just walk, and they walk in the same direction. So they seem to have like a destination, and they don't stop to eat, they don't stop to sleep, they don't stop to do anything. They just walk. And people, like their families, their friends, their loved ones, they start following them as well to, you know, stay close to them. And one of the people that we're following, like one of the main characters, is the sister of the first girl that started sleepwalking. And we're also following like a bunch of people who are trying to figure out like why this is happening. And at first, like I was really intrigued, really, you know, interested in what was happening. But then like maybe 200 pages in, I was kind of like, and you know, because we were just following them walking, and it was a lot of also like reactions of people to this weird phenomenon, and I was just like, okay, and like what is gonna happen? But then we got a reveal of like why they were sleepwalking and how it was connected to the possible end of the world. And that was definitely fun. And in the second half of the book, we got a like a new sort of POV in like a new setting that was super fun to follow, and I loved that. And I also really like the ending, and definitely want to read the second one in the series, like the duology. It's the last one. So yeah, definitely got me very interested, like the way it ended, and I ended up also really liking this one, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I read What Feasts at Night, which is the second book in the Sworn Soldier series, which is a horror series, and we follow Alex. And Alex used to be a soldier, and in the first book they go to visit their friend who is like sending weird letters, and when they get there they see that that friend is sick, and even the house and like the wildlife around the house is kind of dying and weird and disgusting. And it was very creepy. Like I love that book. It was so creepy. It was very like body horror, disgusting horror kind of thing, which I do really love. So I loved the first book, and I also love Alex. And so in the second one, Alex moves back to their, I mean, they don't move back, they just go back for a while to their hometown. And when they get there, the person who was like taking care of the house, like he has died. And he has died in kind of weird circumstances. And people in the town talk about a creature that steals people's breath, and that's how they die. And Alex like doesn't really believe in that myth, legend thing, but also they can't deny that weird things are happening like around the house, around them, and even in their dreams. And yeah, I definitely really enjoy this one as well. It was also like very creepy, but it didn't really have the like disgusting body horror vibes until the last like third or fourth. So I didn't love it as much as the first one, but I still really enjoyed it because it was still very creepy, very unsettling, very gross towards the end, and I still love the character, especially Alex. So still had a great time and gave it 4 stars. Then I read Before He Vanished, which is a kind of sci-fi mystery book that is part of the Before series. And in the series, we follow characters that can like travel back in time and they can like see events happen, but they like whatever they do, they don't really change what happens in the future. They can just, go observe, interact, but not change what happens. And in the first book, we follow like a different character, but in the second and the third, we follow the same. And so this character that we are following in the second book, she went back in time because she wanted to find her sister who had been abducted. And in this third book, she wants to, help other people with her powers. And she sees that a boy has gone missing, and so she wants to find him, and she goes back in time to do that. And we have obviously chapters from the past, chapters from the present, and we also have like in the past we have chapters from the boy's point of view, which were honestly my favorites. Like I like the chapters from the past in general, like chapters from the boy's POV were definitely my favorite. And yeah, the chapters from the present, not my favorites, because I just didn't really love the way she was investigating, and I just didn't love like anything she was doing in general, except like in the past because we were just, discovering things. So that was more fun. And I mean, I still really enjoyed it. It was still fun, but it wasn't as fun as the first 2 books. And it wasn't as fun like in the present as it was in the past. And I gave it 3.5 stars. Then I read Cruel and Unusual, which is the 4th book in the Case Carpetta series, which is a mystery crime series. And we follow Kay, who is a medical examiner. And in this book, like in the beginning, a convicted killer who was in death row, like he dies. And Kay is tasked with performing his autopsy. And at the same time, there is like a murder that could kind of be connected to that killer. And then there are other deaths that make everything like even more connected. And I really like that this series has it's very focused on the forensic part, which I love because I'm not working currently on anything forensic, but I am a forensic scientist. So love that, but I don't really like the characters. And I haven't liked them since book 1. They have kind of gotten a little better, but they're still like all kind of really annoying to me. And I'm still waiting to start liking them, but I just don't. But this was still definitely my favorite in the series because the mystery itself was super fun. Like I was really invested. I was having a lot of fun with that. So yeah, definitely my favorite, but I still don't really like the characters. And I gave it 3.5 stars. And then I read 7 books in the same series. So I hope this one is gonna be fast because I don't know how long this is gonna be once it is edited, but for now I have been speaking for 46 minutes. So there is that. But I read 7 books in the same series, and that was the Mistborn series. So I read book 0.5, which was like the prequel to everything, and I had previously read the first trilogy, but I had not read the novella that comes before. So I read that, which was the 11th Metal, and in that we were basically following the main character's backstory, like the main character of the first book, his backstory, and like why he decided to start a revolution, and we saw him training his powers, and it was fun, but it was nothing like groundbreaking. It was nothing that we didn't really know before. We were just seeing it happen. But I love that character and I missed him, and I still had a lot of fun, and I gave it 3.5 stars. And then also I forgot to mention, I think that this is a fantasy series, part of the Cosmere universe, which has a lot of different fantasy series and fantasy books, standalone books in it. And it has Era 1 and Era 2 of the Mistborn series, and I have previously read Era 1. And this has like a magic system that is related to metals, and like different metals give people different powers. And the like Arrow 2 is set a few centuries after Arrow 1. And so, yeah, after that prequel to everything, I read book 3.5, which was in between Arrow 1 and Arrow 2. And we were mostly, like in that book, we were mostly, and it was called Secret History. In that book, we were mostly following like the events of the second and third books, like but from another POV. And it was definitely a very fun POV to follow. And we definitely learned more about some things that like had happened in the books, but they were definitely better explained now, like that we were following that POV. And we also learned more about the Cosmere universe. And yeah, it was definitely really, really fun. We learned a lot, and like I said, the POV we were following was super fun as well, and I gave that one 4 stars. And then moving on to the actual Era 2 books. The first is The Alloy of Law, which is like the 4th book overall in the series. And like I said, this is set like centuries after the first trilogy. And the magic system is slightly different because there are some new kinds of powers, but it is still pretty much the same. It is still based around metals. And in this second series, we are following 2 detectives, Wax and Wayne, and they investigate basically crimes that are related to the magic. Or at first they didn't know they were related to the magic, but they soon learned that they were related to the magic. And really fun, really fast-paced. I really like the characters. I really like to see how the world had changed. And yeah, super fun. Gave it 4 stars. And then there was actually a novella between that book and the next, and that was called, it wasn't even a novella, it was a short story. It was like 40 pages at most. And that was Elementor Jack and the Pits of Altania, and you were following Jack, and he was like looking for a treasure, and he is caught and found, or like found and caught, that makes more sense, by some creatures that we knew from the first trilogy. And like they catch him, and then he has to find the treasure and save himself. And that was pretty much it. It was really, really short. And it was fun, but it was like nothing, crazy. So it was just okay. I gave it 3 stars, but it was definitely fun. And then next, the book after that is Shadows of Self. And in this one, like, it starts with an auction where a bunch of people are killed, and they figure out that those people that were killed, that were at the auction, they were the most infamous criminals of like their city. And so they investigate that, like Wax and Wayne investigate that, and it is also related to the magic and new powers. And it was also really, really fun, really action-packed, really love the characters. Also gave this one 4 stars. Then the next book, Bands of Mourning, this one was my favorite in the series because, the investigations were fun, the characters were fun, the action was super fun. Like, all of these books, they are very, like, action-packed. They have a lot of action scenes, and they are all so, so good. But what I really, really loved in this book that I didn't get as much in the other books was that, like, all the characters were working together, and I love to see them working together. And yeah, I gave this one 4.5 stars. And then the last is The Lost Metal. And in this one, everything that was, being built up to happens. And it is also very action-packed like the others. And the magic is still super interesting. And in this one, like, I didn't love that all the characters were scattered, especially after I loved having them all together in the previous book. So that was honestly like my main critique about this book, is that the characters were all like so scattered, and I just love them being together. And also my favorite character was suffering throughout this entire book. So I didn't appreciate that. But I get it, but also I didn't like that. And there was like a thing that happened at the end of this book that was so sad, and I am still absolutely devastated. But like, overall, I still really enjoyed the book, and especially the last third where the main characters were, finally working together again, and it was so cool to see. So I still really, really loved it. and I gave it 4 stars, and that is the end of the series for now. I know there are more books coming out. Don't know when, but eventually there will be, and I am very excited to get into them. And now, for our final book that I am going to be talking about, that was Dear Laura, which was a horror novella, because I was just craving some horror in between the fantasy, because after finishing the series, I am going into another fantasy series, so I just wanted like a break in between the fantasy, even though I absolutely love fantasy, obviously, like the amount of fantasy I have read. But I just, I was craving some horror, so I just decided to read a pretty short horror book. And in this one, we're following Laura, and she had been getting some letters for, I think, 30 years or something like that, from like someone anonymous telling her that they knew where her best friend Bobby was, because Bobby went missing like those 30 years ago. And so that person claims that they know where Bobby is, and through the years, they ask her to send like things, including like her underwear and teeth, which I guess is why there are teeth in the cover. And she sends those things, and now finally, like 30 years later, she is like actively looking for that anonymous person and Bobby. And I mean, it was okay. I wasn't really that invested. I wasn't really like, the letters were definitely unsettling and uncomfortable, but not really the kind of uncomfortable I like. It was an uncomfortable that was not enjoyable. But I mean, it was still okay. I was thinking about giving it like 3 stars, like whatever, it was fine. Didn't hate it. But then I didn't really like the ending. So I ended up giving it 2.5 stars. So yeah, we are finishing this not on a great note, but out of these 31 books, most of them I really, really enjoyed. Like these first 3 months of the year were like really good reading months. So I am very, very happy with most of the books that I have read. And so yeah, that is everything for this video. So thank you so much for watching. I hope that you have enjoyed it. And if you did, give it a like and subscribe. And I will talk to you next time. Bye!